In a city where most of the population are students, Tuma, a level 0 Esper, has the worst luck of all. Not only is his ability a natural enemy for magicians, but it's also a natural enemy to his life. He spends his days trying to protect a young girl he met on his balcony and picks up numerous girls along the way on his path of heroism. When you play the hero of the day, you don't expect to end up fighting the damsel in distress you're trying to save. That's how Kamiju Tuma, unfortunately, ends up when he tries saving a high school named Misaka Mikoto from a bunch of delinquents. She's a level 5 Esper in the city and can control electricity. Tuma, on the other hand, is a level 0 Esper who can negate abilities with his right hand, including all forms of good luck in his life. During their fight, Misaka ends up causing an electrical outage in the city, but Tuma remains unharmed. Tuma's bad luck only gets worse the next day when the outage causes all his food to go rotten in his fridge. He steps out and finds a young girl hanging on the rail of his balcony and begging for food like a hoodlum. She introduces herself as Index while she eats the rotten food Tuma made for her. Index is running away from a magical group because she possesses the knowledge of 103,000 grimoires within her. Who forces a kid to read so much? Anyway, Tuma doesn't believe the magic story she tells him, and she doesn't believe he can negate magic. He ends up proving it by placing his right hand on her robes, which immediately gets ripped apart. Now, he has to serve jail time for having a naked young girl in his room. Index fixes her clothes and leaves the room so the people chasing her don't track Tuma. Meanwhile, he leaves for school, which he is horrendously flunking at. While there, his classmates frame him for looking at other girls' skirts, which makes his teacher cry. I don't know what that was all about. On his way home, he meets Misaka, who ends up making some robots chase them. As he gets to his door, he sees Index covered in blood, while a red-haired man in a black robe approaches him. Tuma finds out Index came to retrieve the hood of her robe she left at his apartment, but got attacked by someone called Kanzaki. The red-haired dude tells him that Index can remember every sentence or text she's ever read but can't use magic. Meanwhile, the human brain refuses to remember how to solve a simple math problem. The guy introduces himself as Steel Magnus and attacks Tuma with his fire ability. Tuma negates it.
Has the power to give life and to take it. Gain power!
But Magnus ends up summoning a fire creature which Tuma finds difficult to defeat. Index then tells him that he has to erase the runic markings in the area, else the fire will keep rekindling. She also says she's part of a church sector called Necessarius, and she's its library. Tuma tries running away like the wimp he is, and ends up falling off the building. He tries to go call the police but comes back and triggers the sprinklers there. The water washes off the ink of the runes, which makes the creature disappear, and he knocks out Magnus with a sucker punch. Tuma tries to help Index and asks her for any grimoires with healing abilities, but his cursed right hand wouldn't let him use the magic. Tuma takes her to his teacher's place, and Index starts glowing and talking like a robot, saying she only has 15 minutes left to live. Index tells Tuma to leave since he's a walking curse that would hinder the healing magic. Tuma leaves and tells his teacher to take care of Index. Index asks Komoe, Tuma's sensei, for the time, and then goes ahead to draw some occultic summoning symbol with her blood on the table. I guess this is where Komoe's life comes to a swift end. Index tells her to start singing along and start imagining an angel to summon it. Who knew angels were summoned just like demons? The room starts becoming weird when Komoe loses concentration, and it looks like she's sinking into the ground. She gets more serious with the summoning process, and an angel appears. Index injuries get healed thanks to the angel, and she then goes to sleep. Tuma comes in the next day to see Index recovering, and lies to Komoe that Index is his sister. This short shrimp of a teacher who looks nothing more than a 12-year-old gets angry that Tuma is lying to her. She goes to buy stuff for breakfast while Index tells Tuma how the church split up due to politics. She says the church sector she belongs to has a special division that researches magic to defeat magicians. While Tuma fools around with Index, Magnus and Kanzaki are keeping an eye on them. Kanzaki, who's wearing torn trousers and looking like a street urchin, tells Magnus what she found on Tuma, but he concludes that information on the boy is probably hidden. Tuma and Index are going to a public bath together, and I came to terms that there's something wrong with the writers of this show. On their way, Index tells him how she has lost memories and didn't even remember who she was when she first awakened. After that, they get into an argument and Tuma gets bitten all over. Very weird. As he's walking alone, the streetlights go off and everyone suddenly disappears as he is confronted by Kanzaki. Tuma was no match for Kanzaki and got his butt smacked around like a child. Kanzaki was aware of the powers of his right hand and attacked him with slashes that he couldn't stop. Tuma still resisted, and Kanzaki mentioned that Index is her colleague, and she's also a part of Necessarius, which is why she's trying to secure her. Kanzaki says that Index can only use 15% of her brain normally, since the other 85% is filled with knowledge of the grimoires. This also means, aside from magic, she's very stupid on an average scale. She tells Tuma that Index needs to have her memories erased yearly, or else the walking library dies, and there are only 3 days left before that happens. Kanzaki lashes out at him for trying to see she's not a good friend to Index, and tries to explain herself. Tuma doesn't buy it, and says they're not willing enough to protect her, and that he's Index's friend. It's only been like a day. Why is he acting like he knows the girl so much? In the middle of his lecture, Tuma passes out. He wakes up and finds out he's been out for 3 days, and luckily, Index still has her memory intact. Moments later, Kanzaki and Magnus walk into the house, and Index promises to follow them on the condition that Tuma isn't hurt. Kanzaki calls Tuma at night and tells him he has till midnight to say farewell to Index, since that's when the time limit would be reached. Tuma tries suggesting that they use the science of Academy City to help with Index's memories, but Kanzaki doesn't trust it. The foolish boy refuses to back down and tries to find a way to help our so-called walking library of knowledge. Tuma glances through a book and makes calls to look for a way and save Index. By the time a health center picks up, the clock strikes midnight, and Index's colleagues enter the room to erase her memories. Tuma tries to persuade them to wait a bit, and they eventually give him 10 minutes to say goodbye to his little lover. Index suddenly wakes up, and he assures that everything will be fine. That's when his brain decides to work, and he figures there's something weird about what he was told. He calls Komoe, who tells him that the human brain can't break down, and it can store up to 140 years worth of memories. Again, this can't be the same brain we all used in school. After the call, Tuma figures the church must have lied to Index and her colleagues to control them. He reaches into her mouth with his right hand, which in normal circumstances should have him arrested for that. Anyway, he finds a seal there that reacts to his ability. Index suddenly starts floating and goes into defense mode to eliminate Tuma, which she refers to as an intruder. Tuma holds back Index's attacks while telling Magnus and Kanzaki that they've been lied to. The magicians help the boy before his hand gets snapped like a twig, and he rushes to knock out Index before she destroys the whole place. Tuma's bad luck was still close to him when a feather of the Dragon Breath ability, Index used, touched him, causing him to pass out. The next day, a doctor gives Index a letter meant for Tuma from Magnus. She rips it open like it belongs to her, and it says that Magnus confronted the church, and they plan on watching her development onwards. The doctor also tells her that Tuma has suffered from memory destruction, just when his brain started being useful. She goes to Tuma, who pretends that he can't remember her, his name, or anything at all. She starts crying, and Tuma reveals that he dispelled the magic with his ability, which he called Imagine Breaker. Stupidest name for a power I've heard. The plot twists once again when Index leaves and the doctor walks in. Turns out the idiot really did lose his memories, but just didn't want Index to cry. Magnus walks into a building and starts talking to a guy named Alistair, who's suspended upside down inside a tube. He starts telling Magnus about an existence known as deep blood that's supposed to kill a certain organism. Alistair also says that Imagine Breaker is the natural enemy of magicians, and tells Magnus to work together with Tuma. Before Magnus leaves, they mention something about deep blood, proving the existence of vampires. Magicians, technology, and now vampires. Can't wait to see how all this unfolds. Tuma and Index are going about their day when Index tries to persuade him to get her ice cream. Two guys approach him, and they get roped in and go to a fast food restaurant. Dude can't just say no to little girls. They get to a table with their food when they see a girl who has passed out from being too broke. The girl spent her money on burgers, and now can't afford a train back home. She says she's a magician and starts asking Tuma and the guys for money to get a train. She must be stupid if she thinks money comes easily. While Index reminds Tuma how she stripped her naked before, some guys in suits walk into the place. The broke girl requests the money from one of them, who she refers to as her cram teacher, and they leave. Tuma and Index find a cat on their way out, and suddenly Index notices some kind of shift in the mana of the place, and goes to investigate. Then Magnus approaches Tuma, and tells him that a girl is being imprisoned in Misawa Cram School, which has been taken over by an alchemist named Aureolus Izzard. He tells him the girl is Deep Blood, and he'll be accompanying him for the rescue mission. If not, his precious little girl, Index, will be taken from him. Tuma gets back home and finds out he now has to start a family with Index and the cat she snuck in. He leaves her and meets up with Magnus, and they go to the cram school. Magnus hands him a picture of the girl known as Himigami Isa, and she's the same broke hoodlum he met earlier. They get inside and see a corpse in armor. Magnus tells Tuma they're existing on a different plane inside the school, which is why they can't interfere with the students and vice versa. Tuma calls Index to see if his family is doing all right, and if he can still maintain contact with the outside world. They get to the cafeteria, and the students there notice them and start attacking with some light orbs. Magnus uses Tuma as bait and runs away, leaving him to deal with the girl casting a spell in front of him. So much for being an honorable magician. The orbs suddenly fall and disperse when Isa shows herself. At the same time, Magnus breaks the spell controlling the students and is confronted by Izzard. After Isa patches up the girl who got hurt, she tells Tuma that she's in a pact with Izzard to attract vampires with her blood, while he promises not to hurt them. Izzard needs a vampire to save someone, and that's why she doesn't plan on leaving the school. Suddenly, the alchemist approaches them and uses his ability on Tuma. Whatever Izzard says becomes reality, and I have a few thoughts that would come in handy with those powers. He stabs himself and tells Tuma to forget everything that happened there. Tuma wakes up at a park beside Magnus and touches his head, which brings back all his memories. He gives Magnus a sweet uppercut for using him as bait before they go back to the school. While they confront the knights at the front of the school, Index had already tracked Tuma there and was now captured by Izzard. They confront Izzard inside the building, and when Magnus figures out his plan, he tells Izzard that Tuma has already saved Index. Apparently, Index was picking up partners like Pokemon, and Izzard was her partner 3 years ago. Hearing the news, Izzard got heartbroken that Index was interested in some other dude now. He should have been happy that she got saved, but men and their pride. Izzard ends up attacking, and he kills Isa in the process, but luckily, Tuma dispels his ability and saves her. While Izzard and Tuma fight,
With simultaneous fire.
Magnus questions the alchemist about why he needed deep blood since his ability could have just saved Index. Izzard got angry and tore off Magnus's skin, and that was when Tuma figured there was something off with his ability as well. Tuma finally realized Izzard's ability only turns his thoughts into reality, meaning he didn't even think Index could be saved, which is why he wanted to use the vampires. So much for alchemy. Izzard couldn't keep his thoughts together and got defeated even after slicing off Tuma's right hand. What a waste. Tuma got his arm reattached at the hospital and was visited by Magnus, who told him that Izzard had lost his memories and magic abilities. Later, Index and Isa came to see him and say thanks. Now it looks like Tuma has 2 girls to take care of. Tuma gets attacked by Misaka the next day for not remembering her name. This was also after his last cash was swallowed by the vending machine. For some reason, Misaka is well versed in the art of stealing from vending machines. She kicks it and gets a drink for herself, then uses her Esper powers to help Tuma, who lost money to it. Tuma had no plans of being an accomplice to theft and ran away. Shortly after, Misaka caught up to him with all the cans, and he had no choice. Kuroko, who calls Misaka her sister, showed up and thought they were on a date. Moments after that, another Misaka showed up and the original left with her. This family has some major issues. On his way home, Tuma bumps into another Misaka. I'm convinced these are clones. She helps him carry the cans to his house while he can't help but steal glances at her undergarments. They get home to see his 2 kid wives, and the clone helps them remove the fleas on the cat and leaves. After his lessons, Tuma bumps into the real Misaka, then the clone that helped him earlier. The clone was trying to help a cat, and Tuma decides to help by going to a bookstore to get more knowledge. I don't know how that's supposed to help take care of a cat. While the Misaka clone waits outside, she gets attacked by a white-haired kid. The clone is getting whooped by the kid who refers to himself as Accelerator. All her attacks get reflected back, and he says he can change all kinds of vectors with his ability. When Tuma leaves the bookstore, he looks for her and follows the trail, only to find the dead body of the clone. The police arrive at the scene like they always do when the deed has been done. When Tuma escorts them, he doesn't see the body or any trail of blood anymore. He eventually bumps into another clone and is soon surrounded by them. One of the clones tells him that they were created for military purposes and we're engaging in an experiment. His one time being surrounded by a group of girls in a dark place, and they leave shortly after. Tuma goes to see Misaka at her dorm, while also forgetting he left a family at home. He is instead greeted by the crazy roommate Kuroko, who invites him in. He is later shoved under the bed when the dorm superintendent approaches the room. What a nice way to treat a guest. Tuma then sees some notes under the bed that say, there's an experiment to increase someone's Esper level to 6 by simulating a battlefield. He heads out to try and find Misaka and figure out what's going on. Tuma approaches Misaka, who is sulking about her miserable life on a bridge. He shows her the papers, and Misaka tells him she already tried attacking different research facilities that were running the experiment. But a new facility just shows up after, and it's like she's running in circles. Misaka plans to die by fighting Accelerator and save the remaining 10,000 clones. Has to be the stupidest idea of playing a hero I've seen. Tuma tries to stop her from going to die and allows himself to get zapped like a fool standing under a tree in the rain. They argue back and forth with Misaka feeling like she's a villain that doesn't deserve to be saved. Meanwhile, Tuma isn't about to let a pretty girl kill herself to save 10,000 clones. You see how this sounds, right? He gets zapped by a really big electrical attack after Misaka had enough, but he still managed to survive. Also, the cat was unharmed for some reason, but let's forget about that. Tuma tries to think of a way to allow Misaka to survive, and eventually passes out. Komoe is at a spa with Index and Isa, telling them about how Espers gain powers through skill development, which involves one being able to obtain their unique reality and distort the proper one. She's also giving them quite the naughty image of Tuma, and I don't blame her. Tuma wakes up on the lap of Misaka just like every guy wants. He tells her he plans to defeat Accelerator and make the scientists think he's weak. Misaka tells him it would be impossible to beat Accelerator, but he just asks her for the location to meet him. One of the clones confronts Accelerator to start the experiment, and he starts talking about how he wants to be strong to the absolute point that it would be a sin to try and fight him. Another crazy guy who wants to become a god is just great. Tuma arrives at the battlefield where the clone is getting beat up, and it's time for him to be the hero again. Accelerator flings him around and brings him very close to meeting his maker. When Tuma slaps his hand away, Accelerator starts wreaking havoc and throwing a tantrum like a child, eventually causing a big explosion everywhere. Tuma got back to a corner but flipped the tables and started beating Accelerator to a pulp. His bravado was short-lived when Accelerator fired some plasma rays at him and was about to drop a big plasma ball on his head. That's when Misaka shows up and tries to save Tuma. She asks her clones for help, and they tamper with the wind turbines, which changes the flow of wind and disrupts Accelerator's ability. Mr. Vector. Changer gets mad and tries to attack the clone, but Tuma stops him, and he gets his brains punched into next week. Tuma wakes up in the hospital after passing out with his hands on the clone's melons. This dude just gets lucky with young girls for some reason. The clone informs him of her shortened lifespan and how she'll be at a research facility to adjust her body to recover some lifespan. After the doctor checks his body and mentions his affinity for hospital rooms, Tuma gets visited by the original Misaka. She hands him some cookies and he cheers her up about the whole clones that have died. When Misaka leaves, Tuma gets visited by Index, and it's just raining girls for him throughout the day. She of course bites him as usual for making her worry, but they eventually make up with Tuma, saying that this time, he fought for himself. Tuma and Index went to some kind of beach resort thanks to Komoe, who told him to leave the city since he might be in serious danger. The next day, Tuma meets with his parents, and you're in for a real shock. For some reason, his mother is Index, and his cousin, who's so clingy, is Misaka. It doesn't end there. He gets back to the inn and sees that the receptionist is one of Misaka's clones. Just what the hell is going on? To make matters more weird, Magnus is the owner of the inn. When Index comes down, it's a boy who looks like Tuma's classmate. Either that last electric shock did get to his brain, or he's been drinking too much. At the beach, it seems his dad has a thing for bringing souvenirs from trips. The bubble pops when his mom shows up with a swimsuit that should send all watchers of this show to jail. The classmate who's supposed to be Index shows up in a swimsuit as well, and Tuma goes back inside to regain his sanity. He sees Komoe on the TV as a reporter, and Kuroko is now the president. I'm having a migraine just seeing all this as well. Tuma meets a Russian magician, Misha, Kanzaki, and his classmate Tsuchimikado. Kanzaki explains that a magic called Angel Fall is spreading through the world, which is causing the appearance of people to be messed up. They explain to Tuma that he's a suspect of the magic since it didn't affect him, and they're looking for the person that cast the spell. At the same time, Tsuchimikado reveals that he's also a member of Necessarius. Tsuchimikado tells Tuma that he's a spy that infiltrated Academy City. but most of his magic is unusable now, after going through the Esper curriculum. It also seems his appearance has been switched to that of an idol, while Kanzaki is Magnus. Tuma finds out that Kanzaki is affiliated with a church and is their strongest saint. Kanzaki asks Tuma to keep watch, as she has her bath in the men's bathroom since people see her as a guy. Didn't take time before his dad showed up and dragged him inside. As they gazed at Kanzaki's wonderful melons, they got chased out with their tails between their legs. As Tuma got back from seeing Misha that night, he rushed to stop his dad and Index from going to bed together before a different calamity would befall his world. The next morning, Misha decided to accompany Index, who was going back to lock the door she had forgotten about. While he spoke with Kanzaki and Tsuchimikado, he suspected Misha was the one who cast the spell when remembered that she said it was incomplete and how she avoided touching his right hand. Maybe she's not really big on human contact. When Tuma gets to the house, he finds out that it was his dad who cast the spell. He rushes back and confronts his father on the beach. After confronting his dad, Tuma finds out he couldn't tell the difference in appearance. That's when Misha shows up and finally reveals herself to be the angel. Kanzaki comes there and tells Tuma to go with his dad and break the spell while she engages Misha in battle.
Controller of the blue, symbol of the water.
Kanzaki is barely keeping and might soon be reaching the pearly gates before the fallen angel. Tuma gets back to the inn, and Tsuchimikado tells him that it was his home that was used as the ritual location, and his dad doesn't know that he cast the spell. So much for changing his son's misfortune. Tsuchimikado tells Tuma that it's either the ritual place gets destroyed in one shot, or his dad gets defeated to break the spell. Tuma tries to protect his dad, but Tsuchimikado quickly knocks him to the ground. His dad tries to help, but shows it's in their lineage to get knocked out. Tsuchimikado starts casting a spell while bleeding out seriously. The spell sends out a beam that targets the house and destroys it, which breaks the angel fall spell. By the time Tuma wakes up, he sees his classmate in a pool of blood. Tuma lands in the hospital yet again and gets visited by Tsuchimikado, who tells him about his ability, Auto Rebirth, which heals him. He also tells Tuma that he's a multi-organizational spy. Tuma gets visited by his parents and his real mom this time as well. Just when you thought it'd end peacefully, Index visits him again, talking about all the bad things he did and gives him a good bite. Tuma seems to be having trouble sleeping since Index sleeps like an animal, which ends up with him having nosebleeds. He heads out the next day with his friends, hoping to complete his assignments before the end of summer vacation, and is tackled by Misaka, who's trying to run away from a boy named Mitsuki. Typical situation of trying to escape a creepy crush. Misaka tells him the situation, and now they have to pretend to be a couple. Tuma, being a very dense boy, starts doing his homework, but Misaka just ends up helping the dumb lad. Mitsuki approaches Tuma as Misaka goes to get drinks, and he also ends up helping with his assignment. When Misaka gets back, she drags her pretend boyfriend away, and they decide to stop the couple's story. Misaka goes to get a treat when Tuma is approached by Mitsuki, but he sees someone that looks like Mitsuki enter the store. The one that approaches Tuma reveals that he's a fake and starts attacking him. Tuma runs away and calls Index, his wife he leaves at home every day, to ask for help. Index tells him that the fake is an Aztec magician who can take the appearance of people. Tuma corners the Aztec and breaks his face. Literally. The Aztec tells Tuma that he's trying to bring down the factions surrounding him, considering how he has powerful allies and has the grimoires as well. While they fight, an iron pillar nearly turns the Aztec into mashed potatoes. But there is an electrical interference that just causes it to fall on his arms. Before he dies, he tells Tuma to protect Misaka since they'll still be targeted by other people. After Accelerator's fight with Tuma, he's seen as a chump in the streets, and every broke, ugly-looking hobo wants a piece of him. Accelerator quickly deals with them, but is followed by a young girl in a cloak who reveals that she's a clone of Misaka. The clone didn't fully incubate and was let out when the experiment with Accelerator was stopped. Accelerator gets back to his place and finds it busted up, and now he also has to take care of a nagging brat that won't leave him alone. They go to a restaurant the next morning, and Accelerator sees a researcher named Amai speeding out of the place in a hurry. The little clone doesn't stop her annoying talking and tells Accelerator how she feels he was trying to connect with the clones when he fought them. I don't know how she came to that conclusion. Amid her ranting, she hits her head on the table out of exhaustion since her body is still incomplete. Accelerator couldn't care less and left the place. He heads to a facility where he confronts a researcher named Yoshikawa. She tells him that the last clone which is following him around was meant to be the command center for the sister network, but her code was overwritten and injected with a virus. When the virus activates, it would cause all the clones to go haywire and attack humans, kind of like what happened in Age of Ultron, I guess. Yoshikawa says the person responsible is Amai. Given two choices whether to capture Amai or return the clone to her incubation tank, Accelerator chooses to be a good person and return the little one to her tank before the virus activates. Accelerator got back to the restaurant and found that the girl had been taken by Amai. He tracks the crazy researcher and stops him from escaping while Yoshikawa heads to his location to meet up. The virus started activating and they were losing time. With only 10 minutes left, Yoshikawa tells Accelerator that he has to kill the clone to save the world. This should be easy for him since he's used to it already. Accelerator then memorized the data stick code and tried to rewrite her brain data with his powers to save her. Amai gets up and shoots him in the head while he's still in the process of deleting the virus files. Cheap shot. He should have fought like a man. Last Order aborted the virus protocol and restarted when Amai shot her, but it was deflected by Accelerator. Back from the dead like a bad dream. He deflected the bullet before it reached his brain, so he managed to survive but passed out after losing so much blood. Amai brought out another gun to finish the job, but he got shot by Yoshikawa. She put the clone in an incubator and said she knew a doctor who'd be able to help Accelerator. Then she started giving a sob story about how she wanted to be a teacher and not a researcher. The two researchers shot each other, but Yoshikawa survived thanks to Accelerator and the doctor. The doctor told her that the facility was closed down alongside the experiment when the higher-ups found out about the incident. He left with Yoshikawa begging him to save Accelerator. Tuma finally got the spotlight after he got kicked out of his show for 2 episodes. It's time to go back to school and he meets Komoe, who's carrying papers on some research data. Later, Tsuchimikado goes to see Alistair and complains about a magician breaking into the city. Her name is Shelley, and she's also a part of Necessarius. Alistair tells him not to worry since he plans on making Tuma take care of it. Does this guy even realize how much he's being used? Komoe is about to introduce a transfer student, but Index walks in like she belongs there. Komoe chases her out, and Isa walks in and introduces herself as the new student. While Index struggles with a vending machine, she meets a girl named Huka whom she befriends immediately. Tuma walks in on them as they're changing uniforms and steals a glance at their bodies. Komoe caught him talking with the ladies and got jealous. Suddenly, Huka wasn't there anymore. Just how is he always in the midst of women? Tuma suggests going out to eat later and goes to withdraw some cash. A money man with the ladies now. Isa meets him and mentions how he's forgotten about her, and then tells him how Hyuka used to be in her school, and how she is the key to understanding the imaginary number sector. 5 Elements Institution. He warns him about her and says she's supposed to be the only transfer student. Meanwhile, Kuroko confronts Shelly and Misaka comes to help her out. But the intruder escapes by using a golem as a diversion. Unfortunately for Misaka, Kuroko buries her face in her melons when she's rescued. Shelly turns the city to her personal chalkboard and summons some eyeballs to search for something. Tuma and his girls head into an arcade after eating, and he gets a call from Isa telling him to run, but he doesn't hear it well because of network interference. Someone else calls to warn him that they're evacuating the underground mall. On their way out, one of the eyeballs Shelly summoned found them. The mall went into lockdown, and they were trapped. It was as if his bad luck was working overtime. Misaka and Kuroko meet up with them when they hear the sound of a cat. Somehow, Index and Misaka get into an argument about who they are to Tuma and eventually face him. I guess having so many women comes with a price. Kukoro teleports with Misaka and Index after their endless bickering, and Tuma leaves Huka to look for the magician. Abandoning a girl in a dark place isn't so heroic of him. Tuma engages Shelly and the golem that is attacking the police, but Hyuka suddenly comes there. Shelly attacks her, and her head splits open like a mannequin, revealing some kind of floating light inside. Hyuka panics and runs away with Shelly in pursuit. Komoe calls Tuma and tells that Hyuka isn't human, but is like a combination of all the Esper little powers in the city. With that information, you just know he's planning on adding her to his collection of women he has saved. Shelly attacks Hyuka after finding her, but the hero of the year shows up once again to save the day. Tuma gets help from the military, and they give him a chance to close the gap between him and Shelly. He punches her lights out, but she just escapes with a magic circle that creates a hole in the ground. Tuma then figures that she's going to attack Index. Meanwhile, Index and Misaka are waiting for them outside. Misaka seems to be taking hints that she's not the only girl that Tuma has picked up. Sphinx, Index's cat, runs away and she chases after it when Misaka notices an underground cover shaking like it's about to burst open. Tuma and Huka are still trapped in the underground mall, and he tells her the situation with Index. Huka offers to serve as bait and help Index since she sees herself as a monster. She jumps down the hole to tail Shelly, and Tuma isn't able to stop her. So much for being a hero. Huka runs to her target while recalling how she used to exist in a different field before coming in contact with Index in the outside world and all their adventures together. Meanwhile, Index gets attacked by the golem that emerges from underground, and she goes into defense mode. She starts calling out commands to thwart its attacks, and for the first time, she's looking quite capable of a fight. But her methods don't last for long, and the golem reaches to knock out her lights. Tuma chases Huka but gets stopped by Shelly, who tells him about an Esper who tried to use magic 20 years ago, named Ellis. She was Shelly's friend but got beaten to death when she tried to save Shelly. Tuma gets attacked by her spells but he disrupts it and punches her again. This guy really doesn't hold back when fighting women. Shelly starts having a brain meltdown about how she really doesn't want Espers and magicians to fight, and Tuma starts with his whole talk no jutsu just like Naruto. Tuma defeats her and rushes to save his housewife. Index gets saved by Huka, who engages the golem. When the golem is about to take out Huka, Tuma shows up to save the day once again. After the golem is defeated, Tuma goes to see Huka, who's sitting at the edge of a scaffolding, like she's about to take a leap of faith. Tuma comforts her, and Index shows to do the same as well. Meanwhile, Tsuchimikado confronts Alistair about trying to create an artificial heaven with the imaginary number sector, and reveals that he's a magician. Huka bids her farewell to Index, and she returns to the field of energy she came from. When peace finally seems to have come, Magnus is seen talking to the archbishop named Laura, who tells him they'll be needing Index's assistance with a situation that has come up. Meanwhile, Tuma sees Index hanging on a rail like when he met her, and she complains of hunger about sending her to the pearly gates. That's all, folks. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing content.